Khora, the ultimate loot frame of Warframe, and honestly I can safely say that every single Warframe player should have a Khora in their arsenal. Why? Because loot, whipping, more chains, more whipping, and red crits. Yes, you need Khora. Let me explain why, my good tenor. Khora's passive is Venari. Venari is Khora's companion, and when you play Khora, you can have your normal companion and Venari with you. She is also the only frame that technically gives you more MR points because Venari counts as a companion and gives you 6,000 mastery points. Venari also gives Khora a 15% speed boost while active and will reappear after 45 seconds if killed. Khora's first ability is Whipclaw, the main spamming ability of Khora. You quite literally whip enemies and do explosive damage in a radius. Now I will get back to this ability as it's a bit more complex and I need to explain the other abilities so her first ability makes more sense. Her second is Ensnare. It's a nice grouping ability that I at first never liked, but it's actually not that bad. You ensnare an enemy and then enemies in the radius will be pulled towards the ensnared enemy. It does have a slight delay when you cast it on an enemy. If you Whipclaw the enemy that has been trapped, it will reset the propagation delay and pull in new enemies in the radius. This is also Khora's Helminth ability, and the reason I've grown to like it is because it is slightly better than other pull abilities in some cases, in the sense that it can pull frozen enemies. So if you pair this with Frost, it works really well. The third is Venari. With Venari, you can cycle between 3 different stances, being attack, protect, and heal. However, I'm not really going to go over this ability as the majority of Khora builds subsume over this ability because Venari isn't that strong, and if you subsume over this ability, you will still have Venari with you, you just can't switch between the different stances and benefit from them. So you're better off subsuming this slot. Her fourth ability is Strangledome. Now, this is where the money is. Khora throws down a dome that traps enemies and pulls them in and gives them a little swing in the air. And if you pair this with the augment Pilfering Strangledome, you get an extra 65% chance of loot dropping. So this is the attraction to Khora. This leads me back to her first ability, Whipclaw. Whipclaw's damage is affected by your melee mods, meaning you need a stat stick to maximize the damage output of this ability. Whipclaw will inflict 200% more damage against enemies affected by Ensnare. That is her second ability. So you want to cast Ensnare first and then cast Whipclaw. When enemies are snatched and swinging in Strangledome, her fourth ability, if you cast Whipclaw in the center or at an enemy affected by the dome, all the other enemies that are affected in the dome will take damage but receive 50% of the total damage dealt. So if you hit one enemy, you hit all of them. However, what you can do is cast Strangledome in the middle of a group of enemies, cast Ensnare on one of them, even though they're going for a nice swing. It's going to look kind of weird. And then you cast Whipclaw for an even bigger damage boost. Ability range affects the explosion radius of Whipclaw. So you do want to stack range, but you're going to stack range anyway because you want a bigger dome from Strangledome. At 200% range, you will get the 10-meter radius off of Whipclaw. You will also want to use the augment Accumulating Whipclaw, which will increase Whipclaw's damage up to 350%. Now, this augment's damage bonus is additive, so stacking ability strength will not give you a bigger damage boost. So there is no real reason to mod for strength for Khora unless you are doing a certain resource farm, which I will talk about later on in the video, so just keep watching. Almost every single Khora build uses Pilfering Strangledome and Accumulating Whipclaw, or just one of them at least. She has another augment called Venari Bodyguard, which I'll be honest isn't the greatest in my opinion, unless you are maybe using it for arbitration, so it stops you from dying and kind of gives you a nice little safety net. And if you like this video, you'll be granted much loot in your Warframe adventures. Thank you. So let us discuss the Statsticks for Khora and explain how it works. Whipclaw has innate 25% crit chance and 200% crit multiplier and 20% status chance. This is taken directly from the wiki. The damage from Whipclaw is affected by melee mods, ability strength, and melee combo counter. We don't really want ability strength because you don't need it, but it is affected by melee combo counter, meaning you want to use mods like Gladiator Might, Blood Rush, and Weeping Wounds. And Whipclaw increases your melee combo counter for your stat stick every time you cast that ability. The two stat sticks that I have chosen to use are the Ripkas and the Ceramic Dagger. However, you don't need these two specific ones. You just really want any weapon or Zor that has a high Riven disposition. It doesn't need to be these two specific weapons. People often use Zors as stat sticks, and I know that Amethyst is one of them as well. Rivens greatly increase your damage here for Khora's Whipclaw for min-maxing, but it's not the end of the world if you don't have one. If you do get a Riven, you want crit chance, melee damage, and crit damage. These are the best stats for Rivens. On my Ripkers, I have gone for a slash based setup because I get fat amounts of bleed ticks off of Whipclaw. So I have prime pressure point, or you could just use normal pressure point. My Riven, which isn't the greatest, but it has melee damage and crit chance and additional combo count chance. Blood Rush to stack crit as we stack melee combo counter. Sacrificial Steel for more crit chance. Organ Shatter. Weeping Wounds because we're stacking status here. As Whipclaw applies the elements that your stat stick has. So if you mod for corrosive, Whipclaw will apply corrosive. I use Buzzkill here to increase the slash weighting by a lot. So slash will almost always apply with max combo counter because of Weeping Wounds. And then Gladiator Might for that extra crit damage, as well as the stacking of crit chance per combo multiplier. So you kind of understand what we do here. We constantly stack mods that scale with your melee combo counter to do more damage and get more benefits. This setup is leaning towards slash procs and not flat damage. Bane mods do not affect the bleed ticks from Whipclaw, so there's no need for them. Pair this with a primer or a panzer that applies viral and you have huge bleed damage. Bear in mind, this setup can be used on any weapon that has a high Riven disposition and a high slash weighting. If you don't have a Riven, you can use Spoiled Strike or Drift in Contact for more combo duration and status chance. For the second stat stick, we have the Incarnon Ceramic Dagger. Honestly, a very strong Incarnon. With a Rivenless setup, you already get red crits from the evolutions with the base 7x combo, and Incarnon forms affect Whipclaw as well, which gives you an extra 100% melee damage. For the mods, we go Pressure Point, Blood Rush, Weeping Wounds, Gladiator Might, Organ Shatter, Sacrificial Steel, Shocking Touch, and Primed Fever Strike to build for corrosive. For both builds, if you don't have the primed version of the mods, just the normal ones will suffice. This stat stick focuses on pure flat damage. You get massive raid crit damage here, and corrosive allows you to do big damage to acolytes in Steel Path. I would recommend running Naramon to maintain your combo easier because of Power Spike, allowing you to decay your combo counter instead of losing it all at once. If you are an early game player and you have obtained Khora, whether it's the primed or non-primed version, and you don't have all of these mods and fancy setups, just pick any melee weapon that you have and then focus on melee damage, crit chance, and crit damage until you start getting better mods. Now, we have spoken about the abilities plus her synergies with her augments, statsticks, and so on. Now let's actually talk about her builds. For the first setup, we have our normal farming setup, no Helminth, nothing. Basically just low strength, high range, standard efficiency, and a little bit of duration so that you can keep your dome up for a little bit longer. For the mods, we use Breeze for Spite and Augur Reach so that we can shield gate really easy with Khora because we are constantly spamming her first ability, so we're going to be making use of a decaying dragon key here. Rolling Guard for survivability. Both augments, like I said, we pretty much always run both augments. Prime continuity for duration, overextended equilibrium for energy sustain and health sustain, and then primed flow or just normal flow. Prime sure-footed is flexible. I obviously use this because I have this. Otherwise, you can just use speed drift. Arcane Energize or multi-efficiency, although you do not need to use Arcane Energize, you can use Arcane Fury as well. That works too. Now, we have our Endo setup. The Endo farm, I have made a full guide on this farm a long time ago, but it's still the same. The meta has not changed. Everything is the exact same. I will put it in the cards in the top right. It is a tedious farm, but it is the best Endo farm in Warframe, hands down. It just requires a lot to set up. So here is the build for the setup here. You can subsume dispensary onto your third as well. That works too. And this is the simple setup. Basically, you want as low range as possible so that you can pull the enemies in and giving you a lot more endo drops. The arcanes are flexible, and this is a very niche setup for a niche farm. And then we have Lycar's Hunt. This setup is arguably the best setup for Khora. Simply the fact that your energy sustain and your energy drops from Lycar's Hunt with Khora is just, it's madness. You genuinely just never run out of energy ever. It is broken, it is amazing, and this is the setup here. It's pretty much the exact same as your normal farm one. They stay the same, nothing changes. Arcane Fury, multi-efficiency, everything's the same except you just use Lycar's Hunt. And also remember that you will have to kill enemies with headshots to increase the duration of this, or you can just, and remember that you'll need to kill enemies affected by 5 or more status effects to increase the duration of Lycar's Hunt. Otherwise, you could just keep recasting it. 31 seconds is long enough. And this is the main build that I would run with Khora. Then we have Spectra. I wasn't going to show it, but I'll show it anyway. Basically, you use Spectra Siphon to sustain your energy. I don't really like the setup. I don't like the playstyle. The range is kind of weird. but here it is nonetheless, and you just use Spectra Siphon, you sacrifice some mods for Spectra Siphon, and that's it. And that's it for this setup. Then we have Resource Farm. Now, this is the weird farm that I was talking about earlier on, and basically you will use this to farm certain resources. So for example, I would use this to farm polymer bundles, and when it comes to the mods, you can use prime continuity, or you can just switch it off for prime flow if you're not sustaining your energy enough. But I'm going to use prime continuity because more duration on your Strangledome. Now, the resource farm build is mainly used for polymer bundle farming, like I said, and to do this farm, you basically just spam Magus Anomaly, your operator arcane, and kill enemies with your Strangledome. You have to kill enemies with your Strangledome. However, when it comes to the polymer bundle farm and any other resource that you will choose to do this with, you will benefit more from having a full team for the enemy density and also going for about 20 minutes plus. You will get a lot of resources by doing this. All you need to do is use this setup here, find a spot that's super tight and compact and that all enemies can swarm you. Use Magus Anomaly, which is my new favorite arcane. Just keep spamming in and out to your operator to keep pulling all the enemies in, and your Strangledome will kill the enemies, dropping more loot. I would suggest using both boosters for this farm because you will not be doing this in Steel Path, because you won't be able to kill the enemies with your Strangledome in Steel Path. You will need to kill as Khora, and you will also need a Necros with Desecrate, and you can add a Speedver to speed the enemies up. And this is a very simple Starchart build for you as well. When it comes to other Helminth slots, Nourish works really well and Dispensary works really well on Khora. These are two other Helminths that you can use. And for the Archon shards, you definitely want to stack melee critical damage off the red shards and then some casting speed shards as well. This will help her a little bit in terms of casting her fourth and her first ability. And that's it for the Archon shards. And now let's talk about Venari. Honestly, I don't see a need for a whole bunch of Former. I just put 3 Former on. To be honest, I don't really take notice of Venari that much, but if you want to min-max your setup, you can basically just copy a Smeeta setup. So you'll put Fetch, Tech Assault, Link Health, Primed Animal Instinct or Normal Animal Instinct, Link Armor, Synth Deconstruct, Synth Fiber for when you use Equilibrium, and Medipet Kit for Bleed Out Reduction, and then Primed Pack Leader. Now, the nice thing about this is the fact that Whipclaw counts as a melee, which means that if you put Primed Pack Leader on Venari and your companion, whether it's a Smeeta, Panzer, or whatever your companion is, you get free lifesteal, which is really, really nice to keep your pets alive. But for the most part, they don't really die that much unless they get one shot, but that's where Tech Assault comes in nice. So yeah, that is Venari and her setup. If you want to sync another Former and finish the build, then you could just put on Tech Enhance. Really, it doesn't really matter in my opinion. I have not finished the build for her, nor do I plan to. So yeah, this is my half setup basically. Now, what makes Khora so great? Well, besides the fact that she is a loot frame that has a lot of crowd control with a whip that does ridiculous damage, she is actually really tanky. Now, let me explain. Because Khora is a spammy frame, you will shield gate a lot. Like this example here. As you can see, I am literally just walking and I'm not dying because I'm shield gating. If you don't know what shield gating is, comment down below and I will make a full guide for you explaining it fully. So with Khora, you will want to run a decaying dragon key, lowering your total shields so you get over shields easier. But here is the thing. Khora and Khora Prime technically have different builds. Why? Because standard Khora has lower shields than the Prime variant, which in this case, it is actually better to have a standard Khora. I just have subsumed my base Khora and I've already sunk 6 Former into Khora Prime, and I think we all know how much of a pain it is to farm standard Khora. You get Khora from Sanctuary Onslaught. Khora has the capability to constantly gain overshields from casting Whipclaw. All you'll need to do is use a decaying dragon key, which lowers your base shields of 300 by 75%, which means you will get 75 shields. Whipclaw costs 25 energy per cast at base, and with Brief's Respite plus an Auger mod on your Warframe, you'll only get 190% conversion, which means you will only get 47.5 shields, which is not enough. If that confused you, Brief's Respite and Auger mods convert a percentage of energy cost from abilities to shields. Brief's Respite gives you 150%, Auger mods gives you 40% per Auger mod. In order for you as a standard Khora to constantly gain overguard per Whipclaw cast, you will need to have Brief's Respite, Blind Rage in your build so that you lower your efficiency for Whipclaw, which brings the energy cost up to 38.75. On top of this, you will need to have an Auger mod on your build for your Warframe and another auger mod on your weapons. You can do this by using a primal weapon like my epitaph here, which has auger seeker on, which brings up the conversion to 80%. You can use any other weapon or just use a stat stick and just throw on another auger mod somewhere else. That means you have in total 150% from Breeze with Bite, 2 auger mods which equals 80%, 150 plus 80 equals 230%, 230% of 38.75 equals 89.125, which means we have overshields per Whipclaw cast on Khora getting the maximum amount of shield gate time. That's some little mathematicals for you. So in summary, you just need Blind Rage in your build like this one over here, Priest of Spite and 2 auger mods and you are good to go. Khora Prime can, on the other hand, but unfortunately you get about 94 shields and it costs a lot more and you have to build around it and it's just not ideal. However, you could still get away with just having a Decaying Dragon Key, Booster Spite and an auger mod to shield gate with Khora Prime, but you will only get overguard every second cast. If you have subsumed Khora for Ensnare and you are mad enough to farm Khora again, then I would suggest building these builds for base Khora if you want max survivability. Now Khora does have good survivability and good crowd control. However, Khora has one arch enemy, Eximus units. These little shits are the bane of Khora's existence, so watch out for them as they won't be affected by Ensnare or Strangledome until the overguard is dropped. So eliminate them from existence with your weapon or just keep whipping them and you'll be good to go. Of course, pair a Smeeta with Khora for more loot from Charm. Here is the Smeeta build. In terms of Khora's playstyle, I'll be honest, she's a very AFK frame. If you ever feel like just chilling, maybe putting on some series on your second monitor and farming some extra resources in Warframe, then Khora is perfect for that. All you do is cast Strangledome and spam your Whipclaw. Occasionally when enemies get tougher, just cast Ensnare while enemies are in the Strangledome to do more damage, or just cast Ensnare in general and just Whipclaw them. Alternatively, if you do not want to focus on loot, you can focus on Ensnare and Whipclaw while just running around everywhere for a more active playstyle. But I will say this again, I think every Warframe player needs a Khora for loot farming because she is a very handy frame to have. I know there is a Necros too, but I think every Warframe player should have a Khora and Necros together for different scenarios. And that's my Khora guide. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you all understand Khora a bit better after this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one.